computer. Okay, so we are recording now, and I'm going to show you. We're sharing this. You should see my web page here, correct?
Yes.
So this is the Hebrew Doc web page, and we go down to liturgical Hebrew, and we go to. I went to lesson 6 on the first page, so I'm working on all of that. But and then when I clicked on this, that's our secret. You know what? I can't even say it out loud. I'm going to come out of this one, and I'm going to stop my YouTube one for now so that it's not taking up so much bandwidth. And I come to chapter 6, and it's not necessarily about reviewing all of the words and all of that again, but what I wanted to do is go to the very last page of chapter 6, which is, if you have your books with you, or
Yes.
page numbers. Come on. Hold on, make it big. Then it's page 50.
50.
If you have your book.
Uh-huh.
I thought that this was good. I mean, what happens here is we've got, I'll tell you what, hold on one second. Let me stop the share. I'm going to move this over to this side of my screen so that I can be looking at you and looking at the screen at the same time. And then I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to share this. And I'm going to make this, oh, come on. You go here, and you go here. Everything from Zoom is blocking. All right, I'm coming here, and we've got selections from the prayer book, and we're looking at this page, and we're going to make it big enough so that we can see everything that's on there. If you have a question, you may have to call it out. It's hard for me to see everything at the same time here. And we're... Let's see. Okay, there you go. It's in the middle. All right, so let's take a look at this. This one, it's a prayer as part of the liturgy, and I think you know a lot of these words. Some of them were part of our vocabulary, and some of them are not necessarily, but I think even the ones that are not specifically, I think you may know. So we're going to go to, I'm going to spotlight it. And why my spotlight is so little, I have no idea. But that first word is?
You.
What's the first word?
You.
Ata, which means?
You.
You, masculine singular. Ata. And the next word is? Kadosh. So it says Ata Kadosh, which, how would you translate that? Do you have a good translation for that?
Holy.
Right. So what does Ata Kadosh mean?
You're holy?
You are holy. Yeah, I would translate it as you are holy, Ata Kadosh. Remember, there's no to be, verb to be in the present tense in biblical Hebrew, or ever, ever, not just biblical Hebrew. Ata Kadosh, I would translate it as you are, and the R is missing here. Kadosh, you are holy. Okay? And then the next word is?
And your name.
Right, and your name. Good. So she's translating it. She's not reading it. She's translating. I like that. So it's V is and. Shimcha. Shimcha means your. Cha is the possessive ending that corresponds to Ata. And Shem is a name, but it changes the vowels a little bit when it gets the possessive ending on it. So it says Ata Kadosh, you are holy. V'shimacha Kadosh, you are holy, and your name is holy. Got it? And then it says, U Kiddoshim. So Kiddoshim is the plural of Kadosh. I'm going to ask you, let's see, Aaron, you may have to unmute yourself for this. I'm just going to say, why does this go from Kadosh to Kiddoshim? Why does it go from a kamatz to a shva when I add a plural ending to it?
Oh, we know that.
Come on, you know this, you know this? Aaron's got it. Propretonic reduction of the kamatz. That's exactly what's happening. I have a kamatz here. The accented syllable is kadosh, which means that it's in the pretonic. When I add something to the end of the word, I make this first syllable propretonic. And then when I'm in a propretonic situation, when it was a kamatz, it always turns into a shva. Always. It's so cool. So kiddoshim is propretonic reduction. But why is there an u here instead of a v? The way I say and is supposed to be v. Why is there an u instead of a v? Anybody remember that one?
No.
So the way that I remember when this is important, and I'll say this many, many times. The only time you are ever going to see a vowel beginning a word, not consonant, vowel, consonant. The only time you're ever going to see a vowel beginning a word is when you have this prefix u, which means and. It's the only time a vowel will ever start a word. And it happens because of I call it boom. It happens because of boom. So if the first letter of the word is a bet, or a vav, or a mem, or a pei, and I can write this. I could be not so lazy. Hold on. Let's see if I can do this.
So it's not bump, like B and M and P sounds. There's also a K.
So watch. If your first letter is a bet, or a vav, or a mem, or a pei, those 4 letters are called bilabials, which means you make them with your 2 lips. A b, a v, a m, or a p. Now remember that the vav is not really a v where you don't make with your 2 lips. A vav is really pretend you're shaping your mouth into a W, but make a V sound out of it, okay? So it's v. So officially, you don't have to say it that way. Most people in Israel now don't say it that way. Yemenites do, and a few other people do. But bet, vav, mem, pei, the boomp letters. But in addition to bet, vav, mem, and pei, I would add, let's see if we could do this in another color. I would add, and I put it here, that's supposed to be blue, it's hard to tell. I add bet, vav, mem, moving schwa, whoop. Let me see if I can make it moving. A moving schwa and a pei. Those 5 things. If the word starts with one of those 5 things, then you have to go from a v to an u. The bilabials, because when I'm adding this to the beginning of a word, which is the regular thing to add. I didn't mean to draw in the middle of that one. I could undo that and try again. When I'm adding this to the beginning of a word, I'm already adding a bilabial, v. So you don't go from v to b, or v to m, or v to v, or v to p. You don't do that. You're not going to go from a bilabial to a bilabial. So that's why these gray ones you don't have. But the moving schwa is because I'm adding a moving schwa to the beginning of a word. And if my word already has a moving schwa at the beginning of it, which this one happens to because of a propretonic reduction of the kamats, if I already have a moving schwa, then I'm not going to add another moving schwa to the beginning of the word. So the most common thing to do when I have a moving schwa as under the first letter, the most common thing to do is put in ooh. I'm going to make a big one. Ooh in front of it. It's not going to be big. It's never going to be big. I just did that for fun, so you could tell the difference between the two. So that's what's happening for this one. The reason why it's not a v, which is the common thing, is because you have a moving schwa. It's not a boomp, but my boomp is these 5 things: bet, vav, mem, and pei. And by the way, you'll notice that I didn't put a digation in any of these, because as soon as I put an u in front of it, I cannot have a digation. So a word that started with a bet can no longer have it started with a digation, I should say, can no longer have a digation in it. Because after a long vowel, I can never have a digation, and the u is a long vowel. So if I want to say, and blessed are you, I would say u, because it starts with a b, but I'd have to take out the digation. It would have to be u varuch, which is the exact same word. It's the exact same letter. I just can't have that digation there. Okay? Yes, yes?
And do I understand this right? You cannot have 2 moving schwas.
I can't have 2, because by definition, a moving schwa is the beginning of a word or syllable. I can't have 2 beginnings to the same syllable. It's like one of these physics laws or something. I don't know. But I can't have two beginning to that.
And how do we know it's a moving schwa, not a resting schwa?
Because it's the beginning of a word.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
No, it's a really good question. And I don't mean to, you may now kick yourself to say.
You just said that, basically.
Yeah, because I just said that. But the point is, how do you know? And it's a really good question. You're looking at it, the moving schwa, the resting schwa, they look identical. And how do I know? Because it was the beginning of a word. I just added a prefix to the beginning of a word. And the truth is that even if what I added was, if I added ha, which is a terrible thing, when I add ha to that, this is bad. All right, let's clear this. And let me do this instead. If I turn this into a ha, okay? Even though I added a short vowel here, it's still a moving shva. Because it was the beginning of a word. And that's why I have to have a digation in it anyway. It's still a moving shva. Ha-kedoshim. It's not going to turn into hak-doshim. It's still going to be ha-kedoshim. The word is kedoshim.
Do you mind reviewing real fast or writing it down? Which vowels are long, which are short?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, let me see if we can find the sheet about that, because one of the things that I had promised Marla a long time ago that I don't think I ever did was move them over. So I think where we had that was here. If you go to the beginning Hebrew class, I may have, hold on, let's clear all of my drawings. If you come to, which one, what did I do? Oh, not beginning Hebrew. That's not where I meant to be. Hebrew doc, and we go to the biblical Hebrew class. It may even be in the liturgical Hebrew, but I didn't pay attention. You go to the biblical Hebrew, and you go to the extra handouts over here. Then the spelling guidelines one. So let's see if it's on here.
I'm having some problems.
So it is on some of the flashcards for it, but here we have it right here. We have long vowels and short vowels. So I'm going to copy and paste and put this into our chat also. Boink, boink, and enter. Because this is a PDF, and it's a book from a page of a page from the book that we wrote. But this shows you, and I can show you actually another place where you can find this. And that is, I'm going to, this, all right, Hebrew doc. If we go to the Hebrew Aleph-Bet, any of the Learning Hebrew Aleph-Bet pages where it's the Aleph-Bet, if you go to the vowel aerobics, 2 sides, then we have all of my vowel lessons. Come on, you could do this. It's loading the page. Here we go. So all of these adorable vowel aerobics pages where you have a, e, u, o, it tells you on the back side of these vowel cards that this one is a long vowel and this one is a short vowel. Okay, and even if you're looking at them here, they're always going to be in a column, that these are always going to be the short vowels and these are going to be the long vowels. It could be, when I say always, some of my charts, the long vowels may be on this side and the short vowels may be on that side. And it may be confusing that when you get to the back side, they flip. So if the ones here that you don't see any clues on it, except my cute little drawings, if the right side is the long vowel, then once you get to the flip side, the left side has to be the long vowel so that you can print it back to back. All right. So those are a few different ways that you can find the long and short vowels. And eventually, hopefully, you kind of remember them just by feel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to put it. Yep, but those are ways to find it. All right, where are we here? We're in the Biblical Hebrew. Why? Because of there. All right, so now I'm taking that one away. We don't need the Biblical Hebrew updates. We don't need the spelling rules. And we don't need that beginning Hebrew right now. We're doing chapter 6 right now. Here we are. So now we have Ata Kadosh v'Shimcha Kadosh. And essentially all you have to be able to do is understand it. Read it and understand it if you can. You know what Ata is. You know what Kadosh is. You are holy. V'Shimcha Kadosh. Now you have to remember that V means and Cha means your. It's connected to the Ata form of you, meaning it's masculine and singular. And then you have to know that the Shimcha part means your name. That's the hardest word out of all of what we've done so far. And then Kadosh. So you are holy and your name is holy. And then we got to the plural. We said and Kedoshim and holy, plural things. Kedoshim and holy, whatever this is are holy. B'chol. And I think we've seen that before. So b is a prefix for in or with. Sometimes on, like on Monday, That's just the way we say it in English, at least. B'chol means with all, or on all, or in all. Kol is every, and I know that that's the O vowel, the saddest, most misunderstood vowel, because I'm really familiar with this word. It's a very common word. I like to remember kol is all, that they rhyme, that the kol is all. So if I took away the b, then it would be kol. I have to have I take out the dagesh and the kaf, because this is a moving shva. So there's never a dagesh after a long vowel, and there's never a dagesh after a moving shva. So b'chol means and with all, let's say, or on all, or every, and yom. So it's on every day. Here's a great word. We can start with this one, selah. What does selah mean? We don't know. It means wahoo. That's all it means. Selah is a really
you don't
weird
know
word.
either?
We know, it just means selah. We don't know. It's like wahoo.
I was hoping you knew.
Yep, that's what it means. It means Yahoo. We have no idea. So, Selah. It's a happy, happy day. So it just means, look, here's your translation. In every, and then they say Selah means Selah. We don't know.
For the accent.
I always thought it was Sheila spelled wrong.
That's right. It's Sheila spelled wrong. That's what it is.
Selah, not Salah.
Yep, it's Selah because it's kind of a segolate noun.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's Selah. And which is a little bit more complicated. Here's the weird thing. Look at this. Why is there dagesh in that samech? Why? This is just an ancient weird word. It doesn't make a lot of sense for so many reasons. There's no first glance reason to have a dagesh in that word, except it looks adorable, doesn't it? It really looks adorable. And so it probably is an old word that maybe had more specific meaning at some point. And by old, I mean, maybe it lost a letter. Sometimes there's a dagesh because of a lost letter, even if we don't know what it is anymore. Sometimes there's a dagesh because it's an anomaly word. And this one, I think, is an anomaly word. I'm trying to remember. We had another one. Oh, we had another word that's like that, and it's on the tip of my tongue. I'll try to see if I can remember it.
We don't know its definition, but we think it has a happy connotation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it's a Yahoo.
Yeah, like Yahoo. Okay.
I think it's a Yahoo word. Did I tell you that story about Yahoo? I told you that story. I can't say that word with a straight face because my favorite video of all times is Google Exodus. If you have not seen Google Exodus, look it up on YouTube. Watch Google Exodus. And it is, it's a few years old already, and it is telling the story of Moses and the Exodus in online ways. So it starts off where Moses is logging onto his computer, and his computer name is Basket Baby, with a little picture of a little baby in a basket, and he types in whatever his password is. And the first thing he does is he wants to Google, why is the bush burning but not being consumed? So he goes to Yahoo Answers, Yahoo.com, whatever it used to be. I don't even know if they're still doing that. But you went to yahoo.answers.com or something. And then there's this whole thing, and there's Amazon in the middle of it, and the Kindle is a rock. I mean, and every single page is filled with, you have to pause it. You have to watch it through twice and laugh about everything you see, and then you have to watch it and pause it every 3 seconds, because it'll show the Israelites are, there's a newspaper, and the Israelites are enslaved, and they blame the Israelites. I mean, it's the funniest thing. I mean, every single inch of this is really precious, and you've got to watch it. And the cool thing is, I didn't know this until a few years later, until just last year, I think, that a guy I know, Hillel Smith, did all of the art for this, and the art is amazing. And so, but anyway, watch the Google Exodus. But there was this woman who came into Torah study one time, and you know that I used to. She kind of cured me. That I used to. I'm muting you for a second. She cured me of this. I used to pride myself in not ever laughing when someone asked a very naive kind of question. So why do people hate the Jews? And I won't laugh I wish I knew. I won't do that. I'll try to sit down and be serious and give you an answer. I don't know. But she said, one day, and she loves the Jews. She's not Jewish, but she's kind of Jewish, and she loves like throwing Jewish stuff around, and she just loves all this stuff. And she said, I didn't, so we watched this video, and we watched it, it was like the third time that morning because you have to watch it for all the nuances. And so she said, after we finished, and I love this, I'm smiling so hard. And she said, I didn't think Jews could do that. And I'm thinking, what? Be creative? What? She said, no, Yahoo, because it's God's name. And I lost it. Yahoo is not God's name. I'm just going to tell you that. And we're allowed to yahoo.com if we have to. I mean, is it related to God's name? I could argue it is. But is it God's name? We can go to yahoo.com. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I don't know which rabbi she was following, but I just laughed, and I never laugh, and that was terrible. The other time that I laughed like that was when I was handing out dreidels, and Max's endocrinology nurse had two kids that were the same age as my boys, and I handed her these two dreidels, and it was Friday, and it was getting dark, and I really wanted to get home before Shabbat to light the candles. And I hand out dreidels everywhere I go, but I handed her two dreidels, and she was a very short, very heavy black woman, and she worked for endocrinology. So the first time the doctor said, let Nurse Tiny schedule your next thing, I'm like, well, that's mean. Why are you calling her Nurse Tiny? Because that was her name. That's really what she went by. But Nurse Tiny had two kids, and they were the same age as my boys. And I handed her a blue and a green, so there was no fighting. I figured that's a safe kind of color combination. And she had never seen a dreidel before. So I'm, as fast as I can, I'm saying, well, you have to understand that this is how you play it. You spin it, and whatever letter comes up, and I give her a chart with the letters, and I said, it'll tell you what you do. If it lands on this, you get all, and if it lands on this, you get half. And I said, but the important thing is to remember that these four letters stand for the first letters of the words for a great miracle was there. And she said, well, that's really cool. Which miracle was it, the birth or the resurrection? And that's one that was kind of hard for me to just keep a straight face on. Like, but I did. I may have smirked a little bit, and I said, "Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. That's funny. You should ask that." Actually, and I had to tell her what the miracle was. All right, Marla, you had your hand raised, but I unmuted you, so you have to unmute. You had stuff happening over there.
Okay. I just Googled on another phone. What is the Hebrew translation of Stella?
And it didn't say Wahoo?
No, it said forever, which makes that prayer make sense.
Yeah, but so let me just talk to you about translating. It could be that you look up every place where Selah comes from, and there's a concordance that will do that. Now you've got online ways, you just Google Selah. And if you look it up and you say, hey, I really want to translate this, what would be a good English word that would fit there that might make sense everywhere? And forever might work, but there are other words for forever, and I think my argument is going to be that I think that there is a better reason to translate this as Wahoo, as Selah, that it's a feel-good word and that it's Selah, than to translate it as forever. So it says, and something like, and the holy ones will praise your name every day, Selah. And it could be that you say forever, and that's fine, and I'll let you have that if you want it. But I also think that it's a yay. I think it's a yippee word. So, and we didn't get to the Hallelujah and why it means will praise you. But you've got this too. So, Ukadoshim and the holy ones. So remember we learned that if it's an adjective, it could also represent a noun. If you say, in this case, Kadosh is holy, I could say it's also holy one. In this case, it doesn't have any other subject. So often you'll say holy ones, B'chol yom, every day, in every day. Yehallelucha. It's such a cool word. It's kind of like you have to add water.
Say it again.
So so can you see why it means to praise you? Can you see why? So the root is hallel. Hallel. And when I say hallel with the u at the ending, it means you know that it's a plural ending. For those of us who've taken, if we took the future tense verbs, so the prayer book hasn't taught us the future tense yet. The biblical Hebrew taught us future tense. And the future tense, if I have a yud at the beginning of the word, then it's a marker for a future tense, and it's a third person. So it's probably either he or they. So in this case, it's the u ending means it's not just he, it's they, because the u means plural. So yehalelu means they will praise. Cha, you. So they will praise you. So ukedoshim, and the holy ones, every day will praise you. And if you want, we could take the Marla version and say forever, and I have no problem with that. Or you could say, this is a word of exuberant praise right there at the end. It's showing us how we praise. Wahoo! And then the end of the blessing is Baruch Atah, and Baruch is an adjective, we know that. Did you, and we talked about this, I want to show you something. The 3 root letters, Bet, Resh, Chaf. I want you to see that this was an adjective, Kadosh was an adjective. In this case, we have Kuf, Dalet, Shin, and we have an A-O pattern. If I use an A vowel under the first letter and an O vowel under between the next 2 letters, then I know it's an adjective. If I take an A and an U instead, A under the first, and an U between them instead of the O, it's also an adjective pattern.
Where are we? What word?
Okay,
are we
I'm
looking
sorry. Let's take a look. I don't
Yeah,
know
your
that.
cursor, I'm not seeing your
Yeah, you
cursor.
can't see. Can you see it now? If I turn into a teeny tiny dot, I have no idea why the spotlight is not.
I'm not seeing it at all for me.
Where's
But
the
it's
other
in
There
the
you go,
hand.
it's red now.
Now I see the hand.
Can you see it? How about if I do this?
There we
Let's
go.
if I
I
could
see
do
it now.
this.
There it is. Well, there
Can
it
you
is.
see this word?
Yes.
Kadosh. All right, so
Yes.
kadosh, and I'm sorry because it goes the wrong direction. I need arrows that go this way. But kadosh has an A under the first letter and an O between the next 2. 3 root letters, Kuf Dalet Shin, A-O, that means it's an adjective. Okay? Kadosh, holy, is an adjective. An adjective has to agree, it has to follow the noun it modifies, so atah is the noun that it's modifying, and it has to agree in number, gender, and definiteness. So number means atah is singular, kadosh is singular. Gender means atah is masculine, kadosh is masculine. Definiteness means if the subject, if the noun is the, let's say, something, then the adjective has to be a the also. And we're going to see that over here. If you look at this word, ha'el is the noun, and it says the God, right? And then if I say hakadosh, so kadosh is the same word as what we had up here. We're having it here. And what we have is an adjective form. It follows the noun. The noun is God. This translation for these last 2 words is the holy God. So El is God. Ha-El is the God. And if I'm going to say the God and I want to say the holy God, then the adjective has to follow the noun. It has to agree with the noun in number, gender, and definiteness. Number means God is singular, kadosh is singular. God is masculine, kadosh is masculine. God is definite, you have a ha on it, then this is going to be ha also. It's going to have a definite on it. So that's what we do with adjectives. So we have Baruch is also an adjective form. And what I was saying is that if you look at this word, the kadosh, or this word, it's the same word. If you look at kadosh, you'll see it has a and then o. And the Baruch has an a, but instead of an o, it's an u. They're both adjective forms. In biblical Hebrew, in the Torah, often the o and the u sometimes are interchangeable. Sometimes they're interchangeable. And in this case, for a form, for a paradigm, the o and the u are going to be, when we're talking about an adjective, sometimes you'll see it as an a-u form, and sometimes you'll see it as an a-o form. And that's what's happening here. I just wanted you to recognize the adjective form. And this word, ukedoshim, this word is the adjective form, but it's a plural. So kedoshim is referring to the invisible subject that's over here, the ones who are holy. B'chol yom, every day, yehalelucha, they will praise you. It's the same they that's the kedoshim referring back to. And then Selah, however you want to translate Selah. So Yehalelucha meant they, which is the Yud and the U, and then Halel is praise, and the Cha is you, they will praise you, and then Selah, whatever that means, and Baruch Atah, praised are you, and Atah is masculine and singular, so Baruch is masculine and singular. And in this case, so an adjective is going to, in an adjective phrase, think about this. I can say a big ball, or I can say a ball is big. And if I say a big ball, then big and ball are in the same exact phrase. They're in the same part of the sentence. If I say a ball is big, then the ball is on the other side of the sentence from the adjective. And that's what's happening, the difference between Ha'el HaKadosh or Ha'el HaKadosh, the holy and the God are on the same side of the phrase. It's one phrase. I'm going to say the holy God, one phrase. If I say Baruch Atah, or if I say Atah Kadosh, same thing is happening in both of those things. Atah is on the different side of the sentence than Kadosh, because remember when we translate it, we said you are, there's an invisible R here, you are holy. So I could have even said Kadosh Atah, I could have put it at the beginning. Holy are you. Because in Hebrew, it doesn't, the sentence order doesn't matter. If I'm in a phrase, it matters, but the verb and the subject can come anywhere in the sentence. The verb and the subject can come anywhere in the sentence. If
That's
I'm
so
talking about,
comforting.
if I'm in it really kind of is comforting. It freaks some people out in English, but it is comforting in Hebrew, because remember when we did and so not everybody did, but if you did my Hebrew from day one, and we said Bereshit, and then bara, and then Elohim. In the beginning, bara means he created, and then Elohim, God. God is the third word. In the beginning, he created God. But it doesn't mean that something else created God. It still means that God was the one that was creating, but the order can come in any way. And so the fact that when God, I'm going to say God chose the word order for how God was telling the story, the fact that God chose it that way, Bereshit, in the beginning, now we have a kind of a setting, or we have a with primal stuff, or however you want to translate that first word. But then you have he created, and the suspense is killing me. In the beginning, he created. We know that there's creation going on. It's not until the third word that we find out that God was doing the creation. And so it hits us as we're going, step by step. It's like finding clues to a mystery, that first you have the first clue, and then you find the next one, and now you have to put those two together, and then you find the next one, and it's refining what you know about the sentence. So in this case, we have Baruch Atah, praised are. We have an invisible R here. Praised are you. They're on two different sides of the sentence. Baruch Atah, praised are you. Adonai, Yud Adonai. Why is that Adonai? Anybody have a clue? Yeah, we're not going to spell out Adonai. This is already pushing it. I would consider that a fairly holy way of saying God's name. We're not going to write out God's name. In a prayer book, the only time you're going to see the Yud He Vav He name is if it's a direct quote from Torah. Sometimes in a prayer book, you're going to see these two Yuds without any vowels at all. But when you see these two Yuds and it has a vowel, you can say, thank you very much. Why? Because it's telling you what you're supposed to pronounce when you see those two vowels. Use those two Yuds, I mean. What do you mean tell you what you're supposed to pronounce? If I were to write out the word Adonai, then under the first consonant, I'd have this vowel. Why? That's not an That in Adonai, hold on. In Adonai, I would have an aleph first. And an aleph has a moving shva under it, but an aleph can't have a moving shva under it. So I have to add a helper vowel. But what's really there is a moving shva, and that's why there's a moving shva right here. And then I have Adonai, but I'm doing this in two letters. So the Adonai under the nai part, whoop, is going to be, that's a really sideways nun, but under the nai part, there's going to be that. So if I take away all of these things, if I come back to here, then you see under the first Yud is that which showing me that I have it's reminding me that I'm supposed to be saying Adonai, because those are the vowels that I would have for Adonai. Did you know that? How cool?
That's
Mind
cool.
blown?
Yeah. Can I ask another question?
Please.
Okay. In the translation, where at the part where it's translating Ukidoshim,
Yes.
says the holy. And I would certainly translate that as a noun. And I had written a question, why don't they have ha before it to make it like the holy ones? I mean, I understand it, adjectives and nouns, I mean, but it's just not there. Like,
It really could have been. It would have been v'hakadoshim.
mm,
So it could be and holy ones is a maybe more appropriate translation without the.
but we're still saying it's an adjective, not a plural noun. Kedoshim.
And actually, and this one, the way they translated it, hold on, let me give you my arrow again so you see where I am. So, and it says then the holy, I would say the holy ones, but but you're right, it doesn't have a ha on there.
Mm-hmm.
So you would be just as, see, when they're doing the translation here, hold on, give me a little bit of, when they're doing the translation here, you see where I am? This underlined thing, ukedoshim. It's not saying the holy ones here.
Right.
So someone took some license to be able to say kedoshim means the holy ones and not just any old holy ones.
Right.
We are in some sense being definite. I would have argued that you could have said veha kedoshim to say and holy ones every day. Praise your name, Selah. I would have said not the holy ones.
And then it would have been the instead of because you have the
If
ha
I
in
added a ha,
between,
right. If I was being, so the prayer
wouldn't have
this prayer as it exists right now, I would not have had the holy ones. I would have had and holy ones. Ukedoshim. That's how I would have translated it. And then I'm going to ask you, in the big scheme of things, is there a difference in your mind to say, and everyday holy ones declare, and everyday holy ones praise your name? Or, I'm sorry, and everyday holy ones praise you, as opposed to, and every day the holy ones praise you? Is there a really big difference there between the two? Would it have changed how you understood what holy ones do every day?
No.
No, because you got so distracted by that Selah that you're so busy dancing and celebrating that you're not thinking about whether it's the holy ones or just some holy ones. It may not matter much, the nuance to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit disappointing to me when you write a textbook that you are not being more consistent. But because they're giving this as here they're giving you translation where it says holy ones, and here they're giving you right underneath it, it says, sorry, let me do the arrows again.
That is a quote, right? And it says Hertz, whatever that means.
Yep, so
1975.
right, Hertz is the name of the rabbi who compiled this prayer book. This is a prayer book that's used predominantly in the conservative movement, but also Orthodox. And then when I was in, and I mean I've used it a bunch too. It was prominent in the conservative movement, but Rabbi Hertz was an Orthodox rabbi, I think. Coincidentally, in 1975, this was the new modern translation. In 1975, the Reform movement that same year put out what we love to call Big Blue, the Gates of Prayer, that was the big fat one that had 12 Friday night services, which means Friday night service was essentially the same of the Hebrew, but the translation was different, and they gave you 12 different versions. When the Reform movement was going full-blown hippie and Joan Baez on the service, and I'm not kidding, that's what we were doing. The same year, the conservative movement came out with this, 1975 came out with this prayer book that was supposed to be a little bit more accessible, but they still came out with Blessed art thou, O Lord, the holy God. And I'm not going to lie, the Big Blue Book had Lord in it for a minute too. I think that some of the newer versions, they had to come out with two versions because it was a big fat book and it was too heavy for our old people to carry. So they made another version of it that had thinner paper, so it was lighter, which was pretty dangerous because then you turn the page with your shaky hands and you break the pages, you tear the pages. But it was just an interesting historical fact of those things. All right, clear all my drawings.
Can I ask you a quick question? Just
Yeah, please.
about the prayer book.
Keep going. Keep going.
So when the prayer books prayers are not coming directly from scripture, how old are the prayers that are in there? In other words, all these different translations. They're not adding and making up. Rabbis aren't making up new prayers. Are they? This Hebrew is really old. Like, how old are these prayers? And they're just getting updated translations, or how does that work?
That's a very, very good question. So the answer at the end, what you said about updated translations, that's one of the things that is happening. Each prayer book that comes out is kind of tweaking the most part. They're tweaking the English translation, which could be the interpretation. But I am terrible at history, and you know that. But this is an answer that I do know. Because when the temple was destroyed in the year 70 by the Romans, boo, when the temple was destroyed by the Romans, Judaism changed forever. There were hints about it changing a little bit before then, but when I was in high school and in college, I was taught a kind of a before and after version of this story. And the before and after version was, until the Romans destroyed the temple, the way to worship was you go to the temple, you bring your baby animals, you bring your grains, and that's how you worshiped. There weren't words that you were supposed to say except for one or two specific instances that it talks about in the Torah about bringing your harvest, and you're supposed to say this one thing. But there weren't specifically prayers that you say. You were supposed to do these things. As soon as the temple was destroyed, a decision was made, not as soon as, but after the temple was destroyed, a decision was made that worship would no longer be offering the baby animals and the grains and things, because that had to be done in the temple. And now that there was no temple and no place to do it, and now that we were taken prisoners to lots of places, or we were hiding in the hills, or in Sfat and other places in Israel, but for the most part we could not offer any offerings anymore because the temple was destroyed. So the rabbis made a decision that we were going to use prayers in the place of the offerings. And the prayers, if you look at a prayer service, and we can do this one day, but they follow exactly, step by step, all of the procedures that you would have done if you were bringing your offerings. It was the same steps that they took, but they replaced it with words. And then the prayer service talks about, it'll start with a call to worship, and it will start with a preliminary service. It will start with a call to worship. After the call to worship, it will be something to do with creation. And we know that most of these prayers, most of them were created sometime shortly after the destruction of the temple. And we also know it because around the time when Jesus lived, around 2,000 years ago, the rabbis that wrote down the Talmud were functioning, and they wrote these things down in the Talmud. And so we have written proof of these prayers being created around the time of the Talmud, which is around 2,000 years ago. So that's an answer I've got. Now, and when I tell you that in high school, when I was in high school and college, my kids and I had a conversation about this. Just this week, we were walking around the neighborhood, and I was lamenting the fact that, when I was your age, the periodic table looked really different. And I get that all the things that have been added were kind of hypothetically there, but in my day, the periodic table looked very different. In my day, there were 9 planets. In my day, like, we did this whole thing. So some of these things actually change, believe it or not, because of archaeology. We have actual historical written records of things that were going on then, and yet sometimes the discoveries that we make with archaeology still modify what we knew from back then. And so, for example, the version of the story that I just told you, there are no synagogues and there are no other places to worship. The only place to worship was the temple in Jerusalem, and we would make pilgrimage to the temple for those times. But the only other place that we had, that we didn't worship anywhere else. We came to Jerusalem to worship. We now know, because of archaeological evidence, that there were some synagogues, a few, that had popped up in the Jesus time. We know that. I mean, we're dating them to around there. And so what were they doing? They weren't offering offerings. They didn't have little altars there for the most part. They were doing other things. They were gathering, they were studying, but there was also some kind of worship that wasn't the kind that we knew of, that was animal worship. So animal offerings. So What was it exactly? We're learning that a little bit. But we still do know that these prayers were created around that time period. And we know that some of them might have been created after that. Some things that are prayers and blessings of events that happened after the time of the destruction of the diaspora, it's called the dispersion of the Jews in 70, the galut, the time of the galut of the diaspora. We know that some certain prayers and certain things started after that, because that's when the events happened that caused the events to occur. So that we say prayers or blessings for. So that's a really good question, and that's where those words came from. And I'm not going to lie to you, it is pretty obvious that most of the authors of those prayers were men.
I was
Yep.
going to mention
Kathy.
something. There's a really great, if you're interested in early archaeology, on the finding of, it's terrific. It's on LPB. I think it's actually called A to C, but it's about the first, I mean, even more, like you're saying, archaeology, even more recent findings about the beginning of language. And it's really
I
exciting.
love that. I love the beginning of life. Although, if you can believe that the world was created in 6 days, and that your brain can be flexible enough to know that math works differently in some sense in Torah creation story, if your brain can do that, which mine is really good at ignoring some of the facts of math, I don't mind that at all. If your brain can do that, then you can, like me, have two different versions of the creation of language stories. One of them is that God used Hebrew to create the world. And the Torah reflects that. These were the sounds that God used to make the world come into being. And that's one version that I tell. And yet, I had to take historical linguistics to get a doctoral degree in linguistics. And I can tell you that there were Proto-Hebrew, and there were languages that supposedly came before Hebrew. And there's archaeological evidence of that. But my brain will still tell you that these are the words and these are the sounds and these are the structures of the sentences that created the world. And I'm cool with that. I can live with that. So, all right, we have, if you want, I know we're supposed to finish in a few minutes, but we may want to look at the bottom of this and
The middle word is,
go ahead, Kathy.
yeah, people that's totally different from what in our review. It's a totally different looking word. I mean, the other one has an ion, an ion.
All right, so let's look at that. We have two words here that mean people. And I'm going to tell you that the word means people or nation, right? We've already learned that it was people, and both of these mean people or nation. One of them is Am, and when we studied Am, and I think we've had it in both of our books, we saw an ayin, that's my ayin, and we saw final mem. Mm-hmm. So one of the deceptive things is that if it's a standalone word, then I need a final mem because the mem is at the end of the word. In this case, I'm adding a suffix to it, the cha suffix, which means your. And so I have to switch from a final mem to a middle of the word shape. So that's one trick that happened. So let's take a look at this word. Ka means like or as. Cha means your, masculine singular potentially. And what's left is am, which is actually this kind of am, but I have to take away the final mem part of it because it's in the middle of the word now. So I'm taking all those scribbles away. So ka, am, cha means like your people or like your nation. Does that help, Kathy? Did that answer that question?
Yeah, and the middle word too.
And then the middle word is goy. Yeah. And goy is not a word that most Jewish people like thinking means a Jewish nation, but it does. It also means Jewish nation because all it means is nation, because it will say that we are a goy gadol, we are a really big goy, which sounds like in Yiddish when I say goy, it usually means, or goyish, it usually is referring to non-Jews. It's a non-Jewish. One of my favorite jokes, it's disparaging, I'm not going to lie, but it's disparaging in an adorable way about this old guy who decides he's going to convert to Christianity. And his wife, they've been married like almost 70 years. And his wife is, what, are you crazy? You know, what do you mean Christianity? You never believed in that stuff. And he says, no, I'm convinced. I think this is it. And like, I'm a little bit nervous about this not going to heaven thing. I think I should do this. And she says, yeah, whatever, do it. So he converts. And he's practicing. He's going to church all the time and he's doing his things. And then one morning, she's still asleep. And, they share a bed still. She's still asleep. He wakes up. And he's at the foot of her bed, and he's putting on his talis, and he's putting on his tefillin, because he was used to praying every morning. When he was Jewish, he'd put on his tefillin every morning. Not Shabbos, but he put on his tefillin. And she wakes up and she says, Irving, what are you doing? He says, I'm putting on my tefillin. She says, but you're not Jewish anymore. You're a Christian now. And he says, Goyish cup. Which means non-Jewish head. Like I'm thinking like a non-Jew here. I did a dumb thing. Which is an adorable thing. It's kind of sort of a little bit disparaging, but not really. So I just hope you realize that. But that's one of my favorite jokes.
So Goy in Hebrew and Goy in Yiddish have two translations?
So usually Goy in Hebrew means not someone not Jewish. It's not the only word that means not Jewish. And if you say Goyish, meaning other people-ish, then it usually means not Jewish. Something that's not Jewish. And they'll do these jokes like, so if you become a librarian, that's Jewish. If you become a cheerleader, that's Goyish. They'll do things like that. So we say that in love. But anyway, in this case, Goy also means the Jewish people, because the word in Hebrew just means nation or people. So ka'amecha means like your people. Goy can mean nation or people. Ba means in the. Aretz the word is really eretz. But whenever you say the land, it turns to ha'aretz. And when you want to say in the land, you have ba plus ha becomes ba, in the land. So let's look at this. Ata, we already know what that one is. You. Echad, you are one. And echad can be an adjective also. But in this case, it's on two separate parts of the sentence. Ata echad, you are one. V'shimecha, and your name. Shim is the shame. We saw that above. Shimacha echad. And your name is one. Right? And then it says, umi, and who. Now, why did that v become, why is it this is a v, that's good and smart. Why did that become an u over here?
The bilabial.
Because what?
The bilabial.
Yep, the bilabial, it's a voomp letter. The mem is what started the word. Me means who. And if you want to add an and to the word me, it has to be an u. Because it's a bilabial. Mem is a bilabial. That's the word. Mem is a bilabial. So it has to be u, me, and who. Ka, and there's going to be a hidden is over here. Ka, like. Amecha, that's your people, just like Shimecha is your name. Ka Amecha is like your people or nation. Yisrael, Israel, who's like your nation, Israel.
Just like in the song Shalom Rav, don't we say, Yisrael Amcha?
Amecha, right. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha. Right, Shalom Rav, great peace. And that's a case where the peace and the great are in the same part of the sentence. Shalom Rav, great peace. Al Yisrael Amcha, on your people Israel. Tasim le'olam, you shall put forever. And then it says here, it says Goy Echad. And in this case, Goy Echad is one nation. It's not a nation is one. I'm suggesting one nation. Ba'aretz, in the land. And who is like your one? So, ata echad, you are one. V'shimacha echad, and your name is one. And who is like your people Israel? And so they're taking liberty here by saying, and there is none like. If you say, and who is like you? Like there's none like you, but it doesn't say none like you anywhere here. And who is like your people Israel? Goy echad ba'aretz. And they're taking liberty by saying Goy echad. They're using the word echad to say unique. There's none like it. It's a nation there's only one like it. There's one nation like it in all the land. There's only one nation in all the land. So they're trying. So this is the Gates of Prayer. This is the one that came out in 1975. This is the hippie version. It's Hippie California, Joan Baez. That's what this one is. And that's what happened with the difference of the translations. Sorry, I'm unplugging. My thing is going up and down and up and down. So I mean, I just think it's amazing the amount of Hebrew you already know, and that you can, translate prayers. If any given prayer that you look at, you will know a big chunk of it. And we are only like at chapter 6 here. I mean, I think that we got farther in the book, but this is chapter 6. With only what we knew in chapter 6, we could do all these things. It's just so cool. And I hope you don't mind that our last few sessions have been reviewing by looking at real texts and seeing how to chop it up and do it. To me, somehow, I mean, I do like going back to the textbook, because I like that they give you focused vocabulary words to learn. But I also like looking at actual prayers and things and then seeing if you can understand it. Because the truth is, if you have a prayer that like last week when we did the candle blessing, if you already know the candle blessing and then you break it down into the words and you realize that you know those words, it sinks in a lot better than if you're just sounding out nonsense syllables and you're looking at words and you're picking them up at the it's not the same. I think it's a lot easier like this. So
when I signed up for the class, this is exactly what I was expecting that we were going to be doing.
woohoo! Well, we
I
had
didn't
to
expect all the vocabulary.
we had to catch up with you, and I don't think everybody's very thrilled about the vocabulary and the like the quizzes, the oral reviews and stuff like that. That's not our favorite thing to do, but I do like doing this, and so I think that if we keep doing something like this, where we look at what it was that they were trying to show us, like chapter 7, and instead of just worrying about the chapter 7 stuff, but it helps, then and look at how we apply it better, I think that that's pretty cool. I think
Just
that's
chapter 7 for next week. Huh?
Yep. So let me talk to you about next week for a second, but first I'm going to stop the recording.